Why would a rational person believe in a god? With all of the pain and suffering in the world, and with the overwhelming amount of evil perpetrated on behalf of one god or another, how does a person come to the conclusion that the god that they have chosen is the one true God?
I promise you, the last thing I wanted to do was find the one true religion. But unfortunately, I did.
Isn't God, after all, just a comforting fantasy for those who find themselves afraid of death? Is an organized church not simply a way to control a massive group of people to collect their wealth and weaponize them for political power? These are the questions posed in A24's Heretic. Heretic is a fascinating movie for anyone who's spent any time questioning religious belief, and it provides a surprisingly agnostic view on the question itself. This leaves the door open for a philosophy nerd that's fascinated by the overwhelming power and often evils of religion to explore the belief systems presented in the movie and maybe circle around some kind of answer to these questions. So by the end of this video, I will at least tell you what I believe, and you can decide for yourself if the belief system you subscribe yourself to stands up when pressed by someone like Mr. Reed who aims to destroy it. The film begins with two young missionaries discussing the ways that they've found to confirm their beliefs. While watching an adult video, Sister Paxton claims to have watched the soul evaporate from a woman. As she realizes her overly loud moaning was heard by someone next door, she's overcome with shame for a moment. It seems to be an increasingly common belief that the shame around sex is completely due to the social stigma imposed by religion. The reason for the sexual repression in religions, though, are likely a lot more complex than simply an avenue to make people feel ashamed. Sex is inherently risky, even to this day, and up until the invention of the birth control pill and the mass production of condoms, it was even riskier. It makes sense to keep something so risky constrained to a stable institution like marriage, especially if the result of not doing so is an exceptional amount of STDs and single parents. And I have some other doubts that the shame around sex is solely due to societal religious baggage. Humans are at their most vulnerable during sex. We are entirely exposed to our partner and engaging in perhaps the most spiritually impactful pleasure that a human being can engage in. I mean, unless you have heroin, because I'm pretty sure heroin is better. Making this act somewhat sacred, or at least constraining it to with someone you love, keeps its spiritual significance intact, and not doing so kind of devalues the act. In my opinion, the shame does not solely come from societal conditioning. Though that is a contributing factor, the shame lies within us, and it occurs when you devalue an act that could be one of the most spiritually significant parts of your life. This idea of the soul leaving the body of the adult model and then watching her whisper "good" under her breath shows her rationalizing this devaluation. She's affirming that there's nothing wrong with her sexuality and therefore she shouldn't feel ashamed. And there isn't anything wrong with her sexuality. The reason you might feel shame here is because there is something significant happening, and using it as something to achieve personal pleasure and nothing more is bound to cause you to be somewhat ashamed. So once our Mormon protagonists find their way into a home of a potential convert, they find themselves sitting across from a man who seems hell-bent on challenging every opinion that they have. Mr. Reed has an expansive knowledge of religion, and he's read more of the Book of Mormon than either Sister Barnes or Sister Paxton. He's studied theology and even purports to have found the one true religion. So he starts off by making every cliched atheistic argument that he can muster, asserting that Joseph Smith simply used polygamy as an excuse to cheat on his wife, and that all religions are essentially iterations of the same narrative. He recounts 10 separate religious stories, all from before the birth of Jesus Christ, that tell functionally the same story. We encounter every logical reason not to believe, which is overwhelming even for the most faithful person. From my own experience growing up Catholic and then rejecting the church and the idea of a loving God in general, I have a great deal of respect for the logical trail that effectively manages to decimate organized religion. Of course, it's true that most organized religions are rife with corruption. The people at the top tend to make an absurd amount of money and use the power of these stories to manipulate a massive amount of people into doing their bidding and into selling their product. They also have this tendency to manipulate the narratives to justify their behavior. This cynical viewpoint, though, leaves a glaring hole in the logic. If it's so obvious that these stories are nothing more than a cleverly concocted fiction in order to control, why have billions of people been fooled into believing them as divine word? The more cynical among you will surely assert that religions prey on the young, downtrodden, and stupid to do their bidding. And this point is not without its merits. There are, however, a great deal of highly intelligent, genuinely good people who question their beliefs and still come up believing in God. They don't believe blindly, and they are not manipulated. They understand the logic of the non-believer, and yet they still believe. You might respond, they are simply afraid of the objective truth that life is meaningless. They cannot face the nothingness after death, and they are willing to ignore the logical truth in order to find some comfort in their lives. I think that this talking point is an incredibly stupid reason to consider why somebody might believe in a religion. It isn't obvious to me that a belief in an afterlife that is dictated by some seemingly arbitrary God who will undoubtedly send someone you care about, if not you yourself, to burn for all eternity, is any more comforting than eternal nothingness. In fact, to me, eternal nothingness sounds a lot better than having the knowledge that someone you love, or maybe yourself, will suffer for all eternity. So let's flip the script and discuss why a smart and logical person might still believe with all of this doubt. Mr. Reed seems to have some kind of genuine interest in understanding why the girls believe what they believe. This is a topic that has been beaten to death by all kinds of thinkers for almost all of humanity. In the film, the girls are presented with two doors. One of them is belief, and one of them is non-belief. It is laid out that one door is salvation, while the other door is complete nothingness, and the girls are to decide which one they think is salvation. Choose correctly, and you escape. Choose incorrectly, and you're probably dead. As the argument is laid out, our expectations are subverted, as the more skeptical of the two girls, Sister Barnes, chooses the door of belief, and the naive believer chooses disbelief in an attempt to appease Mr. Reed. She assumes that what he wants to hear is that he's right, that she's convinced that disbelief is the right answer.
So with that, I would like to agree that you've convinced us, and we'd like to leave through the disbelief door and go home now.
In light of this, Barnes decides to keep her faith. She decides to allow her belief to guide her. But why would that leap of faith be reasonable? Why would someone, when faced with their death, not forego their faith to appease the psychopath that's threatening them? Perhaps the better question here is, why not choose belief? If your odds are 50-50, then belief has the infinite reward of, if you die, there is an eternity waiting for you. Blaise Pascal, a French philosopher, provided what is probably the most reasoned argument for belief in a god. He thought of life as a gamble, and reasoned that placing your bet on faith in God had more expected value than placing your bet on disbelief. If you believe in God, the potential return is infinite, meaning there is an afterlife waiting for you, and you can believe that and take that knowledge into your grave so as not to be afraid anymore. If you don't believe, the reward can only be served in this life. It is finite inherently. Therefore, belief has more expected value. This is a compelling argument for those who have trouble deciding between belief and non-belief. Both sides have a fair bit of reason to them once you break them down into philosophical concepts, so taking them apart and treating them as a gamble makes it kind of obvious in a way, or at least it made it obvious to Pascal. There are a few other arguments, one of them being the cosmic argument. This is the idea that our universe is so unbelievably complicated that the idea that it generated from nothing but a singularity exploding during the Big Bang is even more absurd than the idea of believing that the cause of that singularity was a creative being. This argument carries a lot of weight when you start to consider the sheer amount of moving parts it takes to keep this machine existence going. I mean, even when looking into the human body, we have multiple different specialized degrees that take literally decades to get to even come close to understanding the functioning of a human body. And this doesn't even come close to capturing the evolution and biology and physics that holds our entire universe together. It is so unbelievably complicated. The odds that any of us would be here, the odds that any of this would be here at all, seem to be almost impossible. Yet, here we are. This is the kind of belief that you feel when you look up in the sky and see the stars and find yourself in awe of it. There's something so unbelievable that any of this exists. A lot of people find comfort in the idea that there is a reason for it existing. There are other arguments posed by philosophers for the existence of God, but I'll save those for another video. The core of the disagreement between believers and non-believers lies with a disagreement about what makes up reality. This may seem kind of obvious, but I'm not talking about what constitutes the physical material reality in which we exist. I am relatively confident that we can safely say, in our material reality, there is no being that exists as God, and he certainly doesn't look like a human.
Why not? I'm God.
I am talking about a hypothesis that suggests there is more than just the material world. It's considered in philosophy to be the metaphysical. The arguments surrounding this question about the physical and metaphysical date back thousands of years and have been progressing ever since. In my opinion, it was Immanuel Kant who managed to find the core of this problem in his Critique of Pure Reason. Kant differentiated the world into two parts. One, the phenomenon, which means the things like this coffee mug that I can touch, feel, and see. This mug exists as a matter of experience. There also exists the noumena, which is the mug itself. It is the mug as it exists outside of how we experience it. The way that I think about this is, if I take this mug and smash it over the head of my enemy, would the mug still exist? The material answer is no. The mug has been shattered. It no longer constitutes the pieces that make up mug. But my coffee mug has had a ripple effect that goes throughout the world. Because I have used the mug to vanquish my enemies, I've now cemented myself as the one true king, all because of my coffee mug. So, in some ways, the mug exists throughout time. At least, the idea of the mug still exists, and that idea is in part responsible for all of my actions as the one true king. The idea of the mug is the important bit there. This is something that I think about as a realm outside of the material world. It exists even without time. It is the realm of idea. It is the thing that simply is. The way to think about it is, all of us have a framework of perception to understand this coffee cup. We presume that all of us see the same thing. So the idea of the noumena is that in order for us all to see the same thing, there has to be some kind of framework for perception so that we can all understand it. This framework of perception is something in which everything exists outside of its physical properties. It is the realm of the idea of anything, the idea of the coffee mug. This exists without time. This is the thing for which all of the material world is based on, because if there was not a framework for it to be based on, none of us could really perceive anything. There would be far too much information, which would turn into no information. So the argument here is something like, we are built on top of the framework of ideas that exist a priori to the material world. And we as conscious beings have some kind of access to this realm of ideas. All living beings have some kind of access to it. This is where I start to get into my personal belief about the validity of narrative, especially the narratives that have progressed through thousands of years and motivated billions of people into action. I believe that these stories have accessed a kind of truth that exists not just within human beings in a collective unconscious, but underpins the universe as it is. When we look at these stories, they repeat the same concepts. They repeat archetypes, something I've talked about on this channel a fair bit. These archetypes make up the narratives that act as a guide for us in our lives. So these stories articulate the things that allow us to perceive and to act in the world. I think that these stories are a piece of what helped us develop our conscious mind. Kant is most famous for his quote, "I think, therefore I am." This means that the only thing that you can know with certainty is that you can think. Everything else could be simply a product of imagination or a complex simulation. The thoughts inside your head are the only thing that you can confirm is reality. It's this thought path that leads me to believe in this realm of ideas. This would be the realm in which your thoughts appear from. There is your personal access to this, which is colored by your own life experience, and there is the realm itself. This is what has been referred to as the collective unconscious. So functionally, the debate is between people who believe that everything in the world will at some point be scientifically perceptible to us, or people who believe that something in the world has to exist outside of scientific perception in order for that perception to exist at all. Presumably, everybody who doesn't believe me or doesn't have any idea what my nonsense rambling has to do with this movie has already clicked away. So if you're still here, hit like and subscribe, and maybe leave a comment letting me know what I could do better, what I got wrong in this analysis of the philosophy. I promise that I will do everything I can to get better and better at presenting information like this. So let's get back to the movie. After the girls enter the door, they quickly discover that it didn't matter which door they chose, they both lead to the same place. Aren't you glad I spent all that time talking about it? They find themselves in a disgusting basement, and in this basement we're introduced to the Prophet. The Prophet is quite a decrepit woman who real quick does some insane contortionist calisthenics and then ends her life with a pie. After this, she seems to have been resurrected. This is used as proof that Mr. Reed has found the one true religion, and the Prophet has come back from the dead in order to deliver a message. This cryptic message from the beyond is not going to be too important for this video, so I'm not going to go into detail. The important part is, the ending of it says, "It isn't real." This causes skepticism with the girls, and they start to push back on Mr. Reed. They've had this idea that what he wants is some kind of challenge towards his belief. He wants you to defend your belief. But their pushback ultimately leads Mr. Reed to kill Sister Barnes. He claims he's done this so that Sister Paxton can see her also be resurrected, but that doesn't happen. Sister Barnes is just dead. And Reed's weak attempts to explain this away have no effect. It becomes clear to Paxton that all of this has been a setup. Nobody ever rose from the dead. This is all in fact a setup to prove to Paxton one thing. The one true religion is control. Mr. Reed has taken great detail into setting up this narrative so that the girls find themselves doing everything Mr. Reed wanted them to do. They make all of the decisions and come out right where Mr. Reed wants them. Mr. Reed's religion of control ultimately fails him though, when Sister Paxton does something unexpected and stabs him in the side of the neck, leading to his ultimate death. So all of this brings us finally to the core of the issue. Do you believe? Which door would you choose? To be honest, if you're taking spiritual advice from a 24-year-old on YouTube, your belief system is already far too flimsy as it is. I can't tell you what the right answer is. Nobody can. No priest or pastor or 24-year-old on YouTube or wise old man in your basement can tell you what the answer is. That's not the point of this video. I don't need or even want you to agree with me. All I want to do is set up the possibility that all of these belief systems have a logical merit to them, and whichever place you fall on the spectrum of religious belief doesn't make you better or worse than anyone else who finds themselves elsewhere. People who believe are not inherently being taken advantage of or misled, and people who don't believe are not all damned to hell because of their atheistic ways. The idea here is to come to an understanding that there is not a clear correct answer, so that maybe we'll be more open to understanding each other as a whole. So to close out, I'll clarify to you what I believe, and maybe that'll provide some insight as to what might be worth believing. I think that the thing people call God is the idea of the perfect thing in the perfect place. It is the ultimate ideal. It is not a man or a woman. It is not in the image of us. It has traits of both the masculine and the feminine. It is the structure in which our universe is built on top of. And it does not exist in our physical world. It exists in the realm of ideas. And you exist there too. This is the realm in which the you call you, or the thing that makes up our soul, the consciousness in our minds, this is where it exists. Maybe we can experience it after death, and maybe we can't. The important thing is that the idea that makes up us exists even if human beings don't have access to it anymore. There is an eternity to be lived out within the universe, and our small impact on that does ripple throughout it. And you can burn in hell for eternity simply by wreaking so much havoc that the world goes through hell as a prerequisite for your existence. To me, the stories that we build these religions on are brilliant works of fiction. And I don't think that means they're not real. And it definitely doesn't mean they're not important. These stories, when used properly, function as a guide for action. They help us understand the world, and they help us understand other people. The one thing I believe in the most is the power of stories. And the stories that have developed themselves into religions over thousands of years are by far the most powerful ones that we have. These stories guided humanity to where we are today. And I believe that stories like these and newer stories that come along will be our guide out of the suffering that we're currently facing. I think they reveal truths that exist beyond humanity. I believe they reveal the realm of ideas itself. And the first step that led me down this road of believing in this kind of abstract weirdo religion that I've concocted out of multiple philosophies was believing in the ideal itself. And to some extent, you already believe in the ideal. I was convinced of its existence by understanding that we all have a value system. We all have a way to rank order the things in our lives by most to least important. So at the top of that value system, there is an implied ideal. And to believe in the ideal means to strive to be your best. And if everybody strove to be their best, and we all defined what our best was by the idea that we were moving towards an ultimate ideal, the world might get so much better so fast that we wouldn't even recognize it. This added meaning to my life when I had none left. This helped me create a life that I wanted to live, and it's helped me create this YouTube channel. The belief in the ideal gives life meaning, and maybe it makes the world a better place. And the only thing that you have to do to find out is to take the leap of faith to believe in it. Thank you for watching this video. I really hope that you liked it. I really enjoyed writing it. So please hit like and subscribe. Maybe check out another video. I just did one on Casablanca. And leave me a comment to tell me all the things I screwed up or missed in this video. Thank you so much.